This is my May reading wrap up. I feel like I say this every month, but May flew by. I have no idea where it went. And now we're in June, which is so wild. I had a pretty mid reading month in May. I read 8 books, and I think only like one or two of them I feel like are going to stick around and I'll remember. So I'm hopeful that June is different and that I have like a better reading month. A lot of these books, I have had a hard time sort of like wrapping my head around how I feel about them, which is such a weird feeling for me. And then some of them, I'm like having a hard time figuring out how to explain why I didn't like them or why they didn't work for me. Because sometimes that's like a difficult task when there's like kind of nothing to hold on to. But yeah, that's been my reading month. But let's get into it and let me tell you about all the books that I read. Hotel World by Ali Smith. I have tried to read Ali Smith before, several times, in fact. I think I've tried to read Summer and Winter or Fall. I've tried to read a couple books from the Season series. There's something about her writing that doesn't work for me. And I don't know what it is. It's really hard to put my finger on. I think it's just like she's doing something like quirky and weird, but like not the kind of weird that works for me because I love weird. But there's something about her writing specifically that's like, what? There's something about it that like I can't hold on to, and it feels like the rope is sort of like slipping out of my hands and I just can't like grab on. This book I did finish though, which I was surprised that I finished. It is about it's essentially like a short story collection, which is maybe why I was able to finish it. It's a short story collection that surrounds like this chic hotel somewhere in the north of England. And it's all of these characters that are associated to the hotel in some way. There's one who's like a staff member who dies in the hotel, and then there's one who's her sister, there's one who's the receptionist, there's one who's another like patron of the hotel, and then there's a person who's experiencing homelessness in front of the hotel. And so it's all of their stories sort of about the person who died is kind of like the central thread. And my favorite part of the novel was this section where the person who died, her like spirit is speaking to her corpse and trying to figure out what happened to her. See, that's the kind of weird that works for me. Like the concept is weird and it works, but the writing in this, again, doesn't like work for me. I don't think Ali Smith is an author for me, and I think that that's okay. But I did read this. I enjoyed it. But I don't know that like it's making me want to pick up this season series. I know a lot of people love it, but there's something about her writing that just doesn't connect with me, and I think that that's okay. Like a Bird by Freya Roshin is a book that I read because my friend Billy told me to, and I'm really glad that I did. This was one of the books that I enjoyed this month. It's about a girl named Talia who is the child of immigrants, and she like grew up on the Upper West Side um in like a pretty comfortable way with her sister. Um and then the book is set after college and she's sort of like figuring out her life and what it can look like, but she's also grieving her sister who has just passed away. And then something really traumatic happens to her and her parents kick her out. And so she has to figure out her life on her own from there. So it's sort of like a coming of age. It's really like a document of or living document of grief. Like the way that it tracks grief from her, it's just so well done. That was definitely like the standout for me, and so well done. I also really love the way that this book uncovers different elements of her story. Like you don't necessarily get the traumatic story right away. It comes with time. Like you have to earn it, and then you don't really know what happens to her sister, but it comes with time. And like sometimes that can really feel heavy-handed, and it can feel like you as the reader are feeling the writer like write and figure it out as they go. But here it really worked, which was cool. Um, and yeah, I just really liked this book. I think it deals with like trauma and mental health in a really interesting way. It's beautifully written. The author is a poet, which is so obvious in the way that it's written. It's funny because this book has a lot of parallels with another book that I read this month, All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Matthews, where it's both of them are sort of figuring out what it's like to live under capitalism as a young person who just like graduated college, and figuring out your life and what that can look like. But this one is from the perspective of someone who like grew up comfortable, which isn't necessarily the case in the other novel. But still, it was interesting to read both of them in the same month and sort of like see both sides and see both perspectives. Okay, I'm done rambling about this book. I just liked it. Peuple de verre by Catherine Leroux is a book that's in French, doesn't have an English translation yet, but it's about, or it's a dystopian mixed with literary fiction, mixed with auto fiction, and it's about a journalist who lives in a world where the poor and the people who cannot afford housing, are carted off into like these compound like prison type situations, and like that's where they have to live. And so housing becomes like the greatest luxury, which is like so not far from current day. um but the novel is like told mostly through journal entries. You don't really know that they're journal entries, but you understand that from the beginning, but it's not like you're reading a diary per se, but you understand that you're being lied to the entire time. So it's really unclear what is true, what isn't true, what is fabrication, and what is like sort of her take on reality. You get like different people interjecting and being like, that's literally not what happened. Like she'll recount a conversation that she has with someone, and then later in a different interstitial, like between two chapters, it'll be like, oh, like that's literally not what our conversation was. This is what I said. Why did you write it this way? And she's like, I don't know. And then there's conversations with her therapist where she's like, no, that's like not what happened to you. So she's telling us about her past, and her therapist is like, no, like that's not real. So it's very interesting in that way, but it got old like pretty quickly. I was like, I don't, it's so slippery that it's just not fun anymore, if that makes sense. It's like every time you think you're getting something and you're getting to like the root of whatever's going on, it just like slips out of your hands and it's not that anymore. Um, but it was still interesting. Actually, my favorite part about this is at the end of the novel, there's like a 20-page chapter where it's the author talking to you, the reader, about what her inspiration for this book was. Um, it's kind of like an essay, honestly. It's like she explains that she was living in an apartment for a really long time, and her landlord decided to sell the apartment, and she was like in a building with several other people, and they were sort of like protesting it, like they didn't want this to happen. They went to la régie de whatever, like they were trying to get it to stop, the sale to stop. And then like one thing leads to another. They're in this like long legal battle for years, and then the building like goes up in flames randomly, and like she's like, it's so weird. We don't know what happened, whatever. Um, and then she discusses like the way that we as people have ties to our physical spaces, and she does it in a really interesting way, and it sort of made everything kind of click into place of like the housing situation, the housing crisis, and the way that it um was rendered through this story was like just what she wanted to talk about, which I thought was interesting. But my favorite part was just her essay. So yeah, do with that what you will. All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Matthews is really queer and really messy. This is about a like post grad 20 something trying to like figure out her life. She's living in Milwaukee with like an entry level job, and she's getting paid a lot of money randomly, which like then something is uncovered, whatever. And it's essentially about like living under the crushing boot of capitalism is what I'd like to say, and like societal expectation, and also the white patriarchy. The way that this talks about being the child of immigrants in America is really interesting and really, really well done. I really love this book. It's also about trauma and like a lot of crazy things happen and like this and that, but it's like it's always done in a really beautiful way. And it's really queer. Like I said, I just really like this. This is one of the books that like I straight up enjoyed this month, which was great. And I have wanted to read this for a long time. It's been sitting on my shelf, and a lot of people have just told me like, "You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this." So I finally read it, and I did like it. So thank you for pushing me to read it because I did enjoy it. I'm excited to read more from this author and see like more of their take on otherness, because I feel like that's what's really done well in this book is the way that it talks about the weight of otherness and like as you go through your life how that feels. So yeah, I'm excited to read more from them, and I really like this. Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner is a book I'm having a hard time talking about because I didn't love it. In fact, I'm not even sure that I could say that I liked it. This is my first Ben Lerner, and I read it alongside Martha from Martha's Monthly on Substack, and she chose this book, so this is her fault. And I chose a book that we didn't like last month, so it was my fault then. Um, I don't. Okay, this is supposed to be really good. A lot of people talk about how good it is. The reviews on the back say some really there's outlandish claims about this novel being great. It's about a young American poet who goes to Madrid for a fellowship, a very like prestigious fellowship, and then he just like goes around Madrid for the entire 200 something pages. Um and not much happens, and none of it really means anything or matters at the end, is what I think I've sort of taken from this book. Like, none of this mattered in a way that actually didn't work for me. Um, my favorite part of the novel, let's start there, was the language play. There's a lot of interesting conversation about like being lost in translation, turns of phrase, things that he's missing because he like sort of doesn't have like a full grasp on the Spanish language. Really interesting. And as someone who spent a summer in 2014 in Barcelona learning Spanish, this felt really like relevant to me and felt like really, it was fun to like revisit that moment through this book. But this narrator is like he lies constantly. He's sort of just a shitty person. He does drugs and not in like a fun way. It's just he like treats people badly. He's not a good person. But again, none of these things in like a fun way, which was annoying. And I think like the book is essentially encapsulated for me in one scene where he's at a poetry reading and the person before him goes up and like does it with passion, like does it putting themselves into what they're doing. And then he's like making fun of them and he's like, LOL, like could you imagine like caring about anything? And then he goes up and like butchers it and just like doesn't like it's like he flops like a fish and like he doesn't care. That's what this novel is like to me. Is that experience of like just whatever, it's like it is what it is. And literally at the end of the book he goes, I'm never going to see these people again. I'm never going to come back to this country. None of it matters. I don't care. Like boop, bye. So, yeah, didn't work for me. And that's that. Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong is a book I absolutely love. This was so brilliant. It's an essay collection and essentially talks about all sorts of things. It like blends memoir, essay, cultural criticism. And Kathy Park Hong is the child of Korean immigrants. So she talks about her Asian American identity and what that means to her, like for herself and then also just in general. So it talks about race in really interesting ways. It like weaves together motherhood, art, writing, poetry, the author's a poet, race, all sorts of things in just like such a brilliant way. Like every single essay is I was floored. It's just so interesting. It goes on and on and on. Doesn't feel long at all. And it feels just like a conversation that you're having and like the kind of conversation where you don't want to leave the party because of this person that you're talking to. That's the kind of thing that's happening here. And at the end of the novel, you're like, how did all of these connect? How did all of these snake together in the most interesting, beautiful way? Like full gag, so good. One of the most interesting things I think that was discussed in this book that I guess I hadn't heard or read like rendered in this specific way is the idea or the presence of Asian American people in what feels like a white black binary in America. Like though that's like the race conversation that's happening a lot of the times. And like what does that look like for an Asian American person to feel sort of like in the nebulous space in between where it's not that conversation that's do you know what I mean? Like it was so interesting, so well done. Obviously I'm not able to articulate it in the same way. You should read this book. I shouldn't be the one telling you this, but I did really enjoy this, and this feels like how you do essay. You know what I mean? This is what it should be. um and so very inspiring, and I want to read a lot of these again and again. So yeah, I love this. Human Acts by Hong Kong. This is my third in my series that is my year with Hong Kong. And this is inspired by the Gwangju Uprising, which happened in 1980. And it was like a peaceful student-led protest against the government or against the coup d'etat that was happening. And what ensued was the Korean military forces exerting force on those students. And so that's what like the event is inspired by. It's super violent, a lot of like trauma for the country and for what all the lives that were lost. And this is inspired by that, and it tells that story through like a kaleidoscope of perspectives from a young boy who was unalived during the uprising, his friend who saw it happen, his mother, a person who knew him, like all these perspectives that sort of come color the event, but also like violence in general in the country and in the world, and like the meaninglessness of violence in a way, and the way that like violence, how it comes about, how it's present in everyone, and like why people decide to act on it, which can be really meaningless. And that's sort of what's discussed here in a really like poignant way. Something that was really interesting to me about this novel is that you can kind of feel like the weight of survivor's guilt through it. Han Kang was living in the country when this happened, and so she has a really unique perspective on it. And you can feel her like being ashamed of this thing that happened, but also wanting to show like that her country is beautiful and like the nice parts of her country. And so that's like the duality that's going on. And it's just, it was brutal. It was heart-wrenching. It was really hard to read some sections, but it's really inventive and it's really beautifully done and just a great read. I think Han Kang, unlike James Baldwin, I did my year with James Baldwin last year. I read all of his novels. There's a through line in James Baldwin's work that you can kind of feel there's a way to write a novel that James Baldwin like abides by. Han Kang does it differently every time. She keeps me on my toes. It's a fascinating experience to read all of her books like back to back, because there's nothing tying them to each other than just being really well done. And it sort of feels like she never wanted to be bored, and so she just kept doing, she wanted to talk about a lot of different things, and so she's doing them in really interesting ways and unique ways, and I kind of love that. But there's no through line that I can see yet. So we shall see how that goes. But this was a really fun is not the right word. This was a really great read in my year with Han Kang, and I'm glad that I read it. And I think next I'm reading Greek lessons. So I'll keep you posted on that. But yeah, this was great. Personal Attention Roleplay by H. Felix Tur Bradley is a short story collection from an author from Montreal. I saw them speak at an event, a book event. They were moderating a talk with a different author, and I really wanted to pick up their short story collection because I loved the way that they were speaking. And I saw it at the library the other day, and I said, it's time. And it was really fun. It was really inventive. It was really like innovative, and doing a lot of interesting things. And it really showed like the breadth of their talent. This is so queer. It could only have been written by a queer person, not just in subject matter, but in form and in approach and perspective and POV. Like, it's just really interesting and really done. Like, this was so fun to read. The short stories are all really weird and kooky in a way that I really like and that like I respond to. There's a person who starts becoming obsessed with an ASMR YouTube vlogger. There's a queer metal band. There's a young gymnast who's like obsessed with their teammate. Just so many different things that it's the kind of short story that if I saw it in a magazine, I would stop and I would read it just because it sounds so good. And most of them really delivered. Of course, it's a short story collection, so some of them are stronger than others. My favorites are Maverick, Personal Attention Roleplay, The Q, and Surface Dive. And yeah, I really enjoyed this in general. I'm excited to see what they do next and where they go from here, because this was really great and they are so talented. That was my month of May. Kind of messy, not the best, but that's okay. I have high hopes for June. Usually in June, because it's Pride Month, I'll read only queer authors. I've done that for like years, but it's usually not hard to do and something that I naturally do anyway, so we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of the idea for June, so I have really high hopes that it will be a great reading month, and hopefully it lives up to that. I would love to know what you're reading in June, so let me know in the comments. Did you read any of these books from May also, and what did you think? I need someone to explain to me what it is about Ben Lerner, to be honest, because some people in my TikTok comments were saying, no, like that's the worst Ben Lerner to read. Unfortunately, like you shouldn't read that one. You should read a different one. But I don't know that I need to or will, but we'll see. And also, what is it about Ali Smith? Why do you love Ali Smith? Tell me. I genuinely need to know, and it's not coming from a place of like hate. I respect both of these authors. I just like am so curious. Not every single work is going to work for everyone. Um, and these may not work for me, which is okay. Yeah, so that was that was May, and I will see you in June. And as always, thanks for watching.